Now it's my great pleasure to introduce Helen Vatsikopoulos, the moderator of the Arts and Culture panel. Welcome, Helen.
Thank you very much. Today you've heard some amazing stories, and this panel are professional storytellers. It's our jobs to take your stories and other stories and transmit them out there to everybody else, not just to the Greek diaspora, but to multicultural Australia and white Australia now more than ever. I'd like to introduce our amazing panellists. So Effy Alexakis is a very respected and renowned documentary photographer whose 40-year career is all about documenting the Greek Australian experience. Liz Kaydos is a freelance documentary maker, and she has made documentaries and worked on a lot of series that you have seen. And most recently, she has been very active in connecting the Anzac legend with Greece, and she will tell us all about that. And we have Nina Angelo. Nina is a celebrated Australian artist, author, poet, storyteller, and has written an amazing memoir, which is a story that connects the darker side, I think, of what's happened in Greece and in Europe, and she will tell us about that in a moment. So storytelling is very powerful. It's not just little stories here and there. Storytelling is so powerful that there is a battle out there to control the narrative. Now, Helen and Chrissa have mentioned artificial intelligence. For all the true stories that we tell, we are fighting against the algorithm out there. We are fighting against state players. We are fighting against people on social media who want to discredit our stories. Now, we are on the arts panel, but we could have really had a place in the science panel, because storytelling is something that is being investigated by psychologists and neuroscientists. Every time you hear a story, something within you, within your brain, lights up. The psychologists say that then you experience sharing. So you take on that narrative, you take on that story you've just heard. And what that makes you do is to understand the people who have experienced those things. And what that means is then you have something happening called empathy. Empathy allows us to understand the other and to understand the experiences of those who are not as fortunate as us. Empathy is really important. Now, if you listen to the richest man in the world, trillionaire Elon Musk, he will tell you that empathy is going to be the end of Western civilization. It's something that's got to be stopped. We've got to stop caring about each other. We've got to stop being compassionate, because then everybody will flood into our country and take our homes. Does that sound familiar to you? So there's a narrative out there. And just briefly, the head of ASIO has told us, the biggest threat is not the migrants. It is the fascists, white groups that are emerging in Australia, and they want to counter the narrative that these wonderful storytellers give us. So let's talk about their achievements and what they're trying to do to make this a better place. So Effy, when you and I were growing up, the images of Greeks a lot of the time were stereotypes. Do you remember Con the Fruiterer and his crazy wife Marika? I remember an ad in South Australia where this Greek man went to the bank to get a loan, and they said, "What's your name?" And he said, "My name is Kostas Theodorokopoulos." Hilarious. So we were objects of ridicule. But then again, our generation has grown up and we are now the storytellers. So tell me what made you want to concentrate and make your life's work the recording of the Greek Australian experience?
Well, yes, the stereotypes really made me very angry. It made me very upset. So I rebelled against it by wanting to document what was out there, and the stereotypes we're familiar with. You know, the fish and chip shop owner, the milk bar owner, the black-clad widow, the focus on post-war migrants, and we were much more than that. So with my partner, Leonard Januszewski, who's half the project, we decided to travel around the country and to document people, to document their stories. And it was during that travelling around the country that we did see that there were cafes in every country town. We did see that they did that first generation did that, so their second generation could be the inspiring women that we've seen here today that became professionals. So it inspired me to do something about it. And at the time, in the early 80s, the State Library of New South Wales had a program called Why Care. Institutions were wanting ways to get migrant settlers to leave a mark within the libraries, but they didn't know how to do it. They did it behind their desk. They expected Greek people to go to them. That didn't happen. It was a failure. So, you know, we put our walking shoes on and worked with them.
And you walked all over Australia with Leonard. And what did you find? I mean, I know your Milk Bars and Cafes book is an iconic publication. Every household should have one.
Thank you, Helen.
What did you find? What stories did you find out there about the Greeks and their role in developing Australia that were not told anywhere else?
Well, they were not told. It's like they didn't exist. When you go to research institutions now, you can't find mention of them. Yet, for example, I'll give the town of Wagga Wagga had 10 Greek cafes running at the same time. There's no reference to that. Some of them were, a lot of them had orchards as well. There's no reference to that. You know, they left their rural areas to go to the cities to educate their children. So when we drove around in the 80s, there were very few that remained. So we were just getting the snippets. We met amazing people that also inspired our interest in Greece. In a little town called Binalong, which is very close to Canberra, we met a lady who had come from Kalavrita, and she experienced the atrocities of World War II and the Nazis. She was one of the girls that had hidden in a churchyard, which was put on fire. And the following year, Leonard and I were so inspired by her story that we went to Kalavrita and found her father's tomb. And this poor woman died with dementia, reliving everything that had happened during that period. It was traumatic. So many traumatic stories around the country.
We should be very, very grateful for the work that you've done. So in 40 years... In 40 years, you must have accumulated a lot. Tell us what you've got, you know.
Well, I haven't got I have got the numbers, but the numbers mean nothing because everything's in boxes at the moment. And it's become a huge, huge burden. I'll tell you what the State Library wrote. We've got over 200,000 photographs, 3,000 oral histories, 150 hours of video and film. And recently I was talking about it to someone and saying that I don't want to leave this archive a burden to our daughter. So someone overheard me, and I think I was talking to you, Les, and you, this wonderful benefactor said, I'll give you $50,000. And so, you know, that made me very emotional that someone would put their hand in their pocket for that. And so since then we've been fundraising because we decided earlier this year to gift it to the State Library, because they have wanted it. They've been a very supportive institution with this work. So for the next 2 to 3 years, I want to quality control. I will be scanning all the negatives and paper documents that we have, and Leonard will be providing the information to make it accessible for people to use in the future.
So how do you want it to be used?
It'll be used like a normal research archive. If you look up the State Library, you can be sitting in Greece, for example, and want to know something about the Greek gold miners. So you type in something, and you might, and there might be information there that's relevant to you, and you can download it. We're also trying at this moment, speaking to various people about creating a scholarship or a fellowship so it becomes an active archive. You know, anyone can donate things to an institution, but unless you digitise it, unless you create incentives for people to use it, it'll just stay. So I think an annual fellowship or something that people can, young people, old people, we haven't thought about through that yet, but something to make it accessible.
Well, the State Library, they've been very, very good to you and Leonard in accepting it and wanting to share it. What about other places in Australia, other libraries, galleries? Do you find that people say, "Nah, the Greeks, they've been here for a long time. You know, they're white. They're white. They're integrated. They're part of the establishment. Why do we really need their stories? We want stories from more recent migrants that are perhaps more challenging." Do you find that?
Not so much. I think because the Greeks have been more established, but then you can't see it though. You can't see it. We're still a footnote. And the fact that we're calling ourselves migrants, I really like migrant settler or settler. We're settlers. Born here, we're settlers. Our parents were migrant settlers. So I think language plays a big part on how we reflect on that. And the State Library, all institutions, you won't find much in there. You might find the photograph, but you may not find the information that went with it, unfortunately.
Someone else who's trying to rectify that is Elizabeth Kaydos. Now, Liz, when we were all going to school, we were drummed into us was the Anzac legend, the diggers. And this was the, quintessential Australian history, but it was the Anzacs and Gallipoli. It didn't really go anywhere else. Now, young Liz growing up and turning to someone who actually became a bit of an activist in trying to rectify this. Tell us about your awakening to this.
An accidental activist, may I say. A trip to Greece, back to my parents' island of Lemnos in 2006. Somebody alerted me to the fact that there were Anzacs buried on Lemnos, and that young kid, social studies at school, couldn't understand why Anzacs on earth would be in Lemnos, in World War I in particular. And I went and I visited the Commonwealth War graves, and I was really moved to see 148 Australians buried there. They're buried in 2 war graves. And if you've ever been to Lemnos, it's dry, arid, quite a hostile landscape. And there's this immaculately lawn-filled cemetery with these Australians, New Zealanders, Britons, and people from World War I buried there, and I had no idea why. And I sort of thought, I thought about it, and somebody actually said to me, the centenary of Anzac is coming up. This is really important in Australian history. You should do something about it. I don't know why I was given this this baton or this responsibility, and my Greek Australian head was saying, "Oh, okay, it's really good for Greece, for this Greek story, for Greece to be put back into World War I, and for the Australians to know that there are these people buried here. Who visits them? Who comes to see them?" It's a very sort of eerie place. And I think in this 19-year journey now that somehow the ghosts of those 148 soldiers somehow possessed me and set me on a journey.
So you're being very modest here. You did much more than just bring it to the attention of certain people. You managed to actually get the Morrison government to give you a lot of money to do something much more significant. So take us through the steps of how that progressed.
Well, I want to take it back a step to the sisterhood. Thank you, Chrissa, for giving us that sort of connection today. And really, my journey was full of support from the Greek community, because it was an opportunity for the Greek community here. Someone actually said it really well, that it was a gift as Greek Australians to give Australians back part of their history, because the significance, I'm sort of going to go all over the place, but what was little known is that Lemnos was left out of the history, and it was difficult to find out why those soldiers were there. And in researching, and I'm going to jump sort of trains now and go to what Effy's legacy will leave to people in the future, is what I inherited in this story. in trying to sort of tell the Lemnos story, I would ring all sorts of government departments, and I was trying to find out, and nobody could tell me anything. And the digitisation of archive, there was a photographic archive in the State Library from 100 years ago, and it was a photographer who was a soldier on Lemnos, and he photographed the social history. He photographed not only the soldiers, the nurses, but the Greeks themselves, and he gave us a social history. He gave us a story away from Gallipoli. Everybody knew the story of Gallipoli, but people don't think about the other aspects of war. I mean, what happens? Soldiers are wounded, they need to go somewhere. Lemnos was the base of the hospitals. Women, for the first time, Australian women, travelled to Lemnos and they ran the hospitals. They saved thousands of lives. The local Greek women washed the soldiers' clothes. There was a bond that was being formed and it was left out of the history. We think that 50,000 Australian soldiers travelled through Lemnos, and not all of them were wounded. It was a transit place. It was where the Armada left on the 24th of April to go to that ill-fated campaign. For 9 months, that island was turned upside down. It was secretly given to the British, but his Prime Minister Venizelos secretly gave it to the British to commandeer and to have a staging post. And Australia was a big part of that story. Sorry, and then how to do this was a challenge. It was a great challenge in trying to get people's attention. Sophie Kotsis, I don't think she's here at the moment, jumped on board early on, raised it in Parliament. A team needed to come together. Two other Lemnian girls, Tina and Kaylee Koutsianis, had a skill set and we became a team. We built a brand and we decided that we needed visibility. So we just went everywhere. We created Lemnos 1915 and we tried not to give fatigue, and we put campaigns together during the commemoration. We were very fortunate to have a Consul General, Dr Stavros Kirimis, who had a bigger vision, and he had the power, we had the resources, and we just annoyed everybody that we could ever came in our path. And once we had done the commemorations in Australia, we then thought, for Australians to go back to Lemnos, for the descendants to go visit their ancestors, there was nothing there to tell you this history, which seemed to be like a great injustice. And so we wanted something in Greece. And so together with the Greek community, because this took a lot of people to come together, a group of very high-profile Australian professionals lobbied the federal government, the Morrison government, and we decided that we of course had to engage the Greeks into this exercise, and I was sent to the Greek Pentagon. Who knew that there was a Greek Pentagon? I went twice to the Greek Pentagon, once at 3 o'clock in the morning, delivering propaganda and lobbying materials. So the Greeks came on board and thought that, because we were on in their country, we wanted to create something of a memorial, and we thought that an open air remembrance trail would be best suited, and then you don't have manning issues of museums and things like that.
So in future, when it's coming up to Anzac Day and everybody's heading for Gallipoli, the hope is that then they will go off
Yes,
to Lemnos, and
exactly.
What will they see? What will they see on this trail?
There are 11 installations that will set around the island, and they will tell the story. At the moment, all you know are the cemeteries, and so they will talk you through that whole sort of that history. And one of the bigger plans was that so many people go to Gallipoli, and that we can get people to go to Gallipoli and go to Greece, that Lemnos is a stepping stone, World War I, and of course the people who work really hard with Crete and the Greek campaign, that it's then a stepping stone for those other theatres.
And of course you've made a documentary on this,
yes,
and it's available to view on SBS On Demand.
Yes. And it was only able to be made it's told through the voices of the nurses and soldiers themselves.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Nina, Nina, of course, has an Order of Australia Medal for all the work that she has done with community and the arts and mentoring. And she has written an extraordinary book, memoir, called Don't Cry, Dance. Now, just tell everyone who hasn't read it what it's about, why you wrote it.
Firstly, thank you very much, Ambassador Lara, for seeing me, for understanding where I come from, because this is the first time I've actually been acknowledged as a Greek. I was born in Athens to a Greek father from Thessaloniki, a Sephardic Jewish man, and my mother, she was a Polish Ashkenazi Jewish woman. They met in Auschwitz. My father, who was a canny businessman, he had a business in Athens. He dealt with the UK, America, all through Europe, so he knew how to survive. The one thing, though, he did not, my father did not practice, his family were Jewish, but he joined the Socialist Party. When he was about 11 or 12 years old, he felt sort of more Greek than attached to the religion of Judaism, but that was part of who he was as a culture, because Judaism isn't a religion only, it's a culture of people. I decided I really wanted, as a storyteller, and because all our family were murdered apart from two uncles, one on the Greek side and one on the Polish side, everybody went and there was no stories, there was nothing left. And I was determined then that I would put their story together. I didn't know my father's story for this book, for my family, because when you have no one to talk to, when you don't know who you were, what the names, I didn't know the names of my grandparents, my Greek grandparents, for a long, long time. Once they've disappeared, that was it. And it was a shock to me. We never hung out with the Greek community, and the reason really was that in 1949 we came to Australia. My parents went to the Hellenic Club in Sydney, and my dad wanted to join, and they refused to give him membership because they said, "You're not Greek," because they were Jewish. From that time on, we never hung around with the Greeks. I had my Greek uncle Nico, who married my Olympia. He changed his religion to Greek Orthodox. My other uncle, Roman, they were all doctors on my mother's side. He changed his religion to Church of England or Anglican. But my mum and dad were the only ones that went to the camps. And I said to my mum, why did they change their religion? And, we're still whatever we are. And she said, if a canary's born in a horse stable, it doesn't make it a horse. And so, you are who you are, and you can call yourself whatever you want. But we spoke Greek at home. My Greek mother spoke Greek at home. And she cooked her, the chelemende that somebody gave her. We had Greek food, but they spoke many languages, and we just felt we were people of the world. They spoke 13 languages between them. So this is why today is really important for me to be seen. And I wrote that book. My mum left her story for us. And she typed it out. She died in 85, and she wanted us to know who we were and who our family were. I didn't know my dad's story. They both had the numbers on their arms. We had such a good life. I was their first new life when they'd lost everybody, and I think I came down from the stars. I came down for peace and humanity, and that was me. My dad's story we found in the Holocaust Museum in Washington in the United States. It was 7 hours of interviews, which I didn't know about. And so it completed my book, and also the names of our relatives and those who had died. So it was really important for me to acknowledge them and to see them. And so they knew, even in spirit, to send them off. And in my book, which is my mum's story in the first person, as talking to you, my dad talking to you, because in what we found, what I got, it amazed me. I did not know his story at all. And so it brought up a lot in me. Can I just mention too, this is really important. After I launched my book in end of 2019, I came down, I'd gone into those camps, into Auschwitz, into the running, everything that my parents had gone through, the horrors of the war and being chased and what had happened. And it brought up something in me, and I ended up with a stage 4 lymphoma, a blood cancer, which ironically is what connects me to my family. And I found out as I was lying there, because I couldn't even get the book out there. The book had been launched, but I couldn't do anything more. And I lost all my crazy red hair and my craziness, and I lay there for 5 months. Just before COVID, I lay there healing, and I've tried to find out why did this happen. It's called epigenetics, and we all have it, and a lot of people don't know. I found this out, that when a girl child is born, she has every egg in her ovary she needs, every egg is a cell, every cell has a memory. And when that becomes somebody, they carry the memory 5 generations back. So within me, in my joyful, happy, crazy childhood, it brought that up in me through going through that. And so I just sort of want to say that people, if you look back in time, how you react to things, what happens, that there's often a big story in the background that we need to come to terms with.
The story of the Jews in Thessaloniki, of course, we know from history. They were expelled from Spain back in 14-something. The Ottoman Empire embraced them. Most settled in Thessaloniki and did incredibly well until the Nazis arrived. 60,000 were sent to Auschwitz and the camps. I believe 1,500 survived. I want to ask you how you feel about knowing that your father was rejected, that he wasn't a Greek, even though he was a Greek, but also the fact that in Greece today they're preparing a museum, a Jewish museum in Thessaloniki. Long time.
80 years.
Yeah, long time. And that was the late former mayor, Yanis Boutaris. And it's going to be open. I don't know whether it's open yet. How do you feel about reconciling with being Greek and knowing that anti-Semitism existed?
Well, it did exist, but now I'm seeing the differences. When I was asked to present my book and my dad's story to the Greek community in Sydney, I was amazed. I was agog. I couldn't believe it, and they'd call me. I thought there were other Sephardic Greeks, but there weren't. I was the only one. And then I discovered, because Yanis Malakoutis, who was the Consul General at the time, he was there, and he told the story. I had no idea. I hadn't met him. I didn't know. He told the story, for 60 years after the war. The Greek government and the Greek community denied that the Jews had ever lived there. This was amazing to me, because every time I went back, there was never anything in Thessaloniki. There wasn't a plaque on the ground. There wasn't a memorial. And so when I heard, when SBS wanted to do something with me there on the World News, I heard, she sent me the Guardian thing, that they were building this museum in Thessaloniki. And all I want to do now, and I'm going to take my grandchildren, is to go back with the book and my dad's story, which appears to be one of the only ones they have directly from somebody's mouth. It's all in the first person, the whole book. It's my mum's story from her story, my dad's and my story. I'm part 2. And I want to take it back officially and hand it over and allow my relatives to go free. That's what I want.
And this really speaks to the power of storytelling and having those hidden narratives out there, because there are just as many people who would like to discredit what you say, especially now. And that Greece is changing, and our stories are not just informing the Anglo-Australian and Australian multicultural community, but also the Greek communities finding out about all of those connections. So just one more area I just want to explore very briefly is, and of course we are on Ngunnawal land, and I'd like to pay our respects to the original owners of the land in which we meet. What about the Greeks, stories about the Greeks and Indigenous people? In your archive, you have found some of that. What can you tell us about some of those stories you've uncovered?
Well, there's always, especially early on, there's always been a great connection. I think minority groups relate to each other. Recently, there was, again, this wonderful Greek consul that we had, Mr. Yannis Malikourtis, instigated a forum on Greek and First Nation connections. So it forced me to go through the archive to look for images. Sometimes, because we did a lot of this work, we would do the photography and put it away in boxes. I found images of Greeks with mud crabbing with an Indigenous man in Darwin, in Larrakia, in the 1940s. There's a wonderful... I'm very proud of one of the photos I took in 1987 of Spartacus Tsiamis with his First Nations wife in Alice Springs and children who were encouraged to learn Greek. He was involved in the Civil War, so he couldn't go back to Greece. He felt like a minority here and also there. There's so many amazing stories that will come to light, and I think delving into the archive, it'll bring it all out. We've got historical images of Greeks, Maltese, First Nations people building Ferguson Bridge up in the Northern Territory. There's a lot of images I think will come to light because it's virtually been ignored. It hasn't really been focused on.
Exactly. Nina, you've done some work with Indigenous people.
I have worked with our Indigenous people. I've worked in just about every country town in New South Wales, across Australia, across the Nullarbor in Western Australia, with our Indigenous people, our First Nations people, as a storyteller, and I was a fabric artist. But I called it the fabric of our lives. It's about their stories. So I would go into communities and they would print messages, big banners, flags, teaching people how to make some money from their stories and what. And I've been embedded, but they felt very close to my story as a Greek, Jewish, but they didn't, from where I came from, and that we could relate to each other. They understood me. And so some of my very, very best friends, and I stand with them strong, are our First Nations people here.
Just finally, before we finish up, of course, Liz and Effy and Leonard are going to collaborate on a documentary on the Greek cafes. So here is taking the story a step further, and let's not forget we should take our stories to Greece. So look, I think we'll leave it there. Do we have time for... No, we don't have any time for questions. But thank you very much, everybody, and keep reading stories. Come to the Greek Australia Writers Festival in Sydney, and also buy Hellenic Dreaming, which is a publication that we put together on the Greek Australian experience, and we launched it in Athens at the Australian Embassy last year, and now we have a Greek publisher. So they will find out in Greece about what we experience here, including hardships, which we didn't talk about, which women were constrained by traditional norms. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.